The business development, the emails to new customers is the way to expand, but the marketing to existing clients that you love is the way to evolve.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories.
So here's my story. The other day, I received a mass email solicitation. I think it was from Verizon, giving all of these incentives and these new packages if you buy their different features for them. And then I realized after skimming it that it was only for new customers. And of course, I've been a customer for quite some time. So it got me thinking, and that's not unusual. We may have talked about something like that, but here's what it got me thinking about in my own business, which is we do business development to a certain extent, but I've been thinking a lot lately about how we can continue to market ourselves to our existing clients, and particularly the relationships that we really enjoy, the ones that we would find difficult if they wanted to go elsewhere, not just financially, but just because we're built to serve them. And when I say market to them, I know the easy answer is, well, just continue to do great work. Okay, and that's fine. And of course, that's valid. That the quality
that's like the pay to play, you better at least do that.
Yeah, you better at least
if that's a question, I think there are other problems to discuss. But
right. But I think that what I've been giving thought to is when you have a relationship, when we have relationships with these clients, and they know they can call us, I'm still giving thought to how can I reinforce and even quantify to some extent the value, not in a salesy way, not in an obnoxious way, but just so they are reassured and it reaffirms their decision to work with us. Yeah. How do we really show our value on a consistent, ongoing basis? So the call from Verizon was real, or the email from Verizon was really making me think of the kind of marketing efforts we do to our existing clients. And one more thing, it reminds me of, there was a movie starring Kevin Kline called Dave, where he was the exact double of the President of the United States.
Right. Okay. Oh, gosh.
He had to fill in for him. There was a cabinet meeting, and he was going over the budget. And one of the line items in the budget was for the Department of Transportation that was doing advertising to people designed to make them satisfied with the cars they already purchased. And so this was highlighted as just a ridiculous waste of federal money. You mean you're spending money to make sure people are happy with the cars they already bought? And so it was one of those things played for comedy. But I think about that because I do think that there should be some effort expended in making people happy with the relationships they've already invested in.
Yeah. So I'm like madly taking notes here about like 27 things that I want to say. Clearly my coffee has kicked in and, and my good. ADD is going revving really nicely. Couple things. So you were talking about reinforcing the value that you give. So I definitely want to get to that part, but I want to back up for a second to kind of a precursor to that. Because I heard kind of three buckets: reinforcing the value you already have, potentially selling to, or, marketing to, whatever word you want to use, to expanding the business that you do with current clients. That's another bucket that I have some thoughts on. But I want to even start with just not making current clients feel devalued, which I always have this, I'm not entirely like irritated when I get like a sales thing from Verizon or Comcast or whatever, because I don't expect them to have their, keeping your email list so pristinely perfect. And I have a couple of emails, so they may not have sent that to the email that we have listed on my actual client thing. But if I have a different email, that may be a mass email, whatever. What I do kind of get irritated about sometimes is how often, like Dropbox or Evernote or some of these services that I subscribe to, that I use, that when I go to the website, I have to like search and look and go left and right. All of a sudden, I think GoDaddy is now also this way. I can't remember. I can't find the login because the login button or the thing that says login, it's this like tiny little word, like in a corner or off to the side or below another thing. Sometimes you have to scroll to get to the login thing. I'm like, I'm a current customer. And I totally respect the fact that they are, they need to use that space to market to new business. That's fine. But don't make it like a chore for me as an existing client to log in and use the thing I'm already paying you for.
I noticed that on Dashlane, by the way. But yeah, go on.
Oh, that's interesting. See, my Dashlane automatically just like it does its thing, but because I mainly only use it on my phone. But yeah, those kinds of things where it's like, don't make me work hard. It just makes me feel underappreciated, and certainly as a lower priority. I mean, it's literally a lower priority because it's like, it almost feels like we'll make this page for selling to new people. And then, we have to have some portion of this real estate we have to dedicate to our current clients. And I wouldn't need a lot, just an obvious button that says login. So I don't have to scroll around. But anyway, so there's that piece of it. I do think marketing to your current people is a really interesting tactic. I had friends of ours who, were real estate agents. And for many, many years of them building their empire of real estating, they exclusively marketed to past customers. They did not try to, and this is a whole system. It's the Buffini model or something. They didn't make this up. They were following a model, but they would have, a lot of their customers were either first-time home buyers or their first upgrade from their first home buying experience. And so they would have these movie parties on Saturday mornings where they rent out the movie theater for the latest Disney flick or whatever. And they have bagels and like our whole family could come and watch Up or Toy Story or whatever the latest thing was and eat bagels. And they invested in just hanging out with and creating and staying in front of past and existing clients. And that was the only marketing they did. And I always thought that was kind of brilliant if that works for your industry. Some industries constantly need new customers, so I like that. But at the core of what you were saying, I think one of the most brilliant, like demonstrating your value, and I have a couple of thoughts on this, but I use this service called Sane Later. Actually, it's called Sane Box, but it creates
SANE.
SANE, yeah. And it's, I mean, I guess it's sort of like a spam filter, but it learns very well and quite smartly, where some of them don't, about what's a newsletter, and there's ways that if you just want that one, and it puts them in a separate folder. So it takes everything that it thinks is not really something you want to see, and it puts it in what it's called the Sane Later folder. And I occasionally go through it, especially if somebody just signs up for it. You have to really watch that folder in the beginning because it doesn't know. And then you train it. So if you just if you like star it, because I use Google, it will put just that one email in my inbox, but it doesn't suddenly start putting all of the Kohl's emails in my inbox or whatever. But if I move that email to my inbox, it's like, oh, you want to see all the Kohl's emails in your inbox. And so from that point forward, it does that. So randomly, and I have no valid way of knowing that this is actually like what you're talking about, a marketing tactic, but it certainly works that way, even if they don't do it intentionally, is maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, there will be a period where it doesn't work for like 2 hours. And I will suddenly have like 400 emails in my inbox because that's how many come in. And it's all the emails from this and that and the other and things that I don't actually want to unsubscribe from, but don't really want to see. And because it is a paid service, it's like $5 a month. It's not a ton, but it's $5. And I swear that in that like hour or two where it's not happening, I'm like, I bet they do this so that like, just a little reminder, if you're a little bit like, do I really need to pay $5 for this? It's only $5, but still I could get rid of it. I'm like, holy cow, it makes a massive difference.
But here's the interesting thing from that, or one of the interesting things, and that is when you mentioned them and described what they do, my immediate thought was, okay, how do I make sure that whatever I send gets put by my clients or gets put by the recipients in that box that I want to be put in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so how do you make it important enough? And then you started talking about the absence of it. You know, well, what if you're not here? If you go dark for whatever, do they miss you? But how do I make sure that even if it's not task specific, can you review this contract, or I'm having this legal issue? That's obviously task specific. It would be given a priority. They'd want to see that right away. But it's the other things, the relationship nurturing parts, that I'd want to make sure would be important enough for them to want to see. So it's not salesy, it's not, promotional or whatever, but it still reinforces the relationship.
Well, I think that is the simple but not simple, not simplistic question is what do your particular clients actually value? Like, you could have a weekly newsletter, but if it's like the 90 million other things I get newsletters about, it's going right in my Sane Later folder, and I don't care. But if it was, I've seen one client that, while it's not their direct business, it's a sort of tangential part of their business, they've done a really good job of late being a really important voice, aggregating well-curated information for businesses about navigating issues with COVID. So they have a safety expert on staff that is just a tiny part of their kind of HR consulting that they do, which in and of itself is a tiny part of what they do. But they use that person to put together some really well curated information for a webinar about things to think about if you're trying to bring your people back into the office, and here's some best practices, and here's like this and that and whatnot. And because of that, they have had, they used to do these sessions live, and they'd have a couple hundred people there, but they've been having 600, 700, 800 people register for these webinars, which is like blowing them out of the water, because it is information that is of value. Whereas I see other people trying to stay relevant by just creating activity, like, oh, we're going to have this like networking event, or we're going to have this kind of thing, or we're going to have that. And I'm like, ugh, like nobody has space right now for anything that isn't crucial. Like, there's not a lot of space right now for extraneous ramblings of thought and whatnot. And so asking that question, what will people actually value? What do they need right now? What will make them go, oh, thank goodness that arrived, because I need that thing.
So that's my question. Other than knowing what not to do, you don't want to send out just another newsletter or news about us or any of that stuff. And the second approach is throwing enough mud up against the wall that something, just happens to get somebody's attention. But the question that I have is, okay, what do you see working as far as your clients actually taking the temperature of the people that they want to reach and finding out what's of value and then providing it to them? Do you see that kind of connection where you're not trying to sell anything, you're not trying to perform the service, but you're really using them as a focus group to do better by them?
Yeah. So I've seen it work really well in a couple of ways. And one is this is a tricky one because it depends on the industry, but not trying to do it too en masse. Like, some of it just has to be a conversation, and the conversation in and of itself is useful. Just asking people and understanding where they are. I think that's the part of it that has to be really specific and can't be this generalized way to do it, is how do you better understand your customer and what they care about? And sometimes, I think this is also the really interesting opportunity of it. Sometimes it's directly in the line of what you do. Like, maybe there is a legal thing that your people need. Like, for me, sometimes what will help is just having people feel like you thought of them. I know that sounds really, really silly, but just I saw this article and I thought it might be helpful to you, or just checking in to see how you're doing. That kind of level of just interpersonal connection that doesn't have to be like directly in the line of the service that you provide is like what is just adjacent to the kind of service that all of your clients are dealing with, that you can also be kind of a helpful voice in that. To me, it's like building concentric circles off of, in your case, being a trusted advisor, or in my other client's case, they do insurance and whatnot. So like those things are just one level adjacent to those other things.
Right. So I think there are a number of levels to it. One is just on my own part. I was asked this the other day, what's the best thing that a client can say to me, on a consistent basis? What's the best thing? And I thought about that. I didn't answer right away. That was the ending question. Then we picked it up the next day. And I said, I've had a number of clients tell me that they, in one way or another, they consider me to be part of their management team.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, because it's not just you're the legal guy, because I know I'm the legal guy. I know what it says on my diploma. So then I understand, okay, this is how I want people to think of me. Now, what I've started doing, but I have to get better at it, I've gone to those people who I really want to think that way. And on 2 occasions recently, I've asked them, and I'd say, look, if I could clone you so that I have 10 of you, that's what I want, because you're exactly the kind of business I want to work with. You're the kind of person I want to work with. So what is it? How do I appeal to 10 of you? And so we'll have conversations about that. But I've been giving a lot of thought to forming either individual or small focus groups of the people that I really love working with, and not asking them to recommend me to their friends or whatever like that, because but asking them, what is it that we should focus on to get better at doing what they like us to do?
Yeah, no, I think that's a value. I also think there's a same but different conversation here that also has to do with like building out your business model to fill any gaps where, like what makes it hard to consume the thing you already do or make better use of what you already do. I think I've used this example before. I had a friend who was a financial advisor who primarily worked with like older women whose husbands had passed away. And usually, especially this was 15 years ago, a lot of those women had not had a lot of experience working with them. In their cases, their husbands had handled all of the finances, and that was kind of his specialty. And they found that the one of the barriers to really making it work was that sometimes they didn't know the answers to the questions of, how much this is or where this account is or whatever. So he used some of his staff to they would just go there and help them look through papers and look up things online. And, so offering that service, in his case, he did that just part of to get things rolling. So it wasn't an additional service. But I was just talking to a young lady yesterday who's a startup founder who has just to make the story short, kind of a study guide for a very specific niche industry startup. And that's going gangbusters because she really does fit a need out there that was just not being met. But we were talking about other ways that she could expand the business. And she said it is just kind of like a almost like a throwaway kind of thing of like, well, I think, people could, they don't, once they have it, then they have to be able to structure doing doing it and whatever. And so offering study groups or some kind of community that people, if you buy this, then you are in this, where then you could become part of a cohort, or that you could have that structure to study with people or ask questions, because that's a follow-on to the thing that you have that adds value. So listening to people about where they get stuck, making the most out of your thing, and seeing if that is something that interests you in providing.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And so there are 2 things that occurred to me. One was, for example, in a bank. So in a business banking relationship, you might see that it would be a real value if you had a line of credit or a larger line of credit. And so maybe I know there are business owners out there that don't know much about putting that package together for a bank. And so maybe help in actually putting the package together so that the committee could review it. So that's one thing. Another thing that I took from what you said is, let's say you have a business owner who right now is fine, but they do envision that whether it's in 3 years, 5 years, et cetera, they might want to sell their business. Now, one of the things that I always recommend, it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're buying a kayak or whether you're selling a business or you're buying a beach house or whatever, I like to go to Google and I'll enter the question, what I wish I had known before buying a kayak. What I wish I had known before buying a beach house. What I wish I had known before selling my business. And sometimes
that is amazing advice.
Yeah, it's great. So you get up at the top, you get all the crap and the ads and all that. You want to buy a beach house. Well, but as you get down into the threads of conversation, whether it's Reddit or whatever, you're like, oh yeah, that's a good question. And so I use that a lot. And so I'm wondering, maybe as part of the focus groups, the things that you can do. So when I buy and sell companies or help my clients buy and sell their companies, getting together these discussions from people who have been there. What I wish I had known before this acquisition, or what I wish I had known before bringing on an outside CEO that was not a founder of the business, or what I wish I had known before doubling my staff,
Right.
and providing that real live Google with follow-up questions. So that might be something where I could see your core constituents would be going, yeah, that's what I want to hear. That's how you market to the people you love doing business with.
So much so, because that in and of itself, I see two layers to that. Using it for, to have those resources for your current people for the things they typically do, like buying and selling companies or doubling their staff or whatever. Also for you to Google for your own industry, like what I wish I'd known before I hired a business lawyer, because that tells you, or a coach, like, or before I had my roof redone or whatever, so that you can, because if you can be the person who doesn't cause those problems, which is kind of why you created the Empty Hourglass program, that you saw a problem in the industry that kept people from using you in the way that would be most helpful, because every phone call was a buying decision. And so they would put it off, and then that causes problems. So you were looking for, like, how can I avoid that problem by doing things differently? And I think that is, it sounds so overly simplified, but I think it's simply, I know for a fact I've told this story on the podcast before, but years and years ago, there was this to-do app called Productive with 2 E's. That's why I go Eve when I say it. Productive.
It's not French.
Yes.
It's just spelled wrong.
Productive. And they were very early, like they had just launched, which I didn't realize at the time, but they were one of the first people to use natural language, which I just found so helpful, because you could say, like, call this tomorrow, and it would change that to the next date. And so it just, anything that saves clicks and punching things in, I was all over. And I just thought that was brilliant. And they had a couple other things that were just efficiency forward things that I loved. And I was using it with some of my clients and helping them kind of use it as a way that I was helping them be more efficient and whatnot. And that had some issues because it wasn't set up to do it that way for me to be able to see into their things. Anyway, so I ended up talking to them to say, like, can mine be set up this way? And they did. They changed mine because they were early enough that they considered that sort of thing. They're like, oh yeah, we'll give you permissions to do it this way. And they said, well, you seem to really be using it. This is the whole point. They wanted to get on the phone with me to say, like, what are you loving about it? Why this and why not other things? And so they took the time to interview me. And, it doesn't have to be a focus group. You can just talk to a person and ask them, say, like, what are you liking about this? Knowing that they may be the only human in the world who likes that thing, so you can't just assume that it is,
But they speak for millions.
They speak for millions, but it's good information to have. And then you have to figure out what you do with that information. But hysterically, they were asking questions, and she said it before I even got to answer my part of it. She was like, oh, we're really excited to hear what you have, like what you're loving about it. And then she said, I kid you not, she said, it's the beaver, right? And I was like, what? I honestly had no idea what she was talking about.
Like a Microsoft animated paperclip from years ago?
No, it was sort of, I guess. I don't even really remember. That's how not in my line of sight it was. But they did have this like little, and I think it was a beaver. I don't even remember. It was some sort of animal that was kind of the mascot or whatever. And apparently they had this image that the value that they offered was this funness vibe that they brought to do, like in their minds, what they were creating was a to-do app that would be fun. And I think as part of that, they tangentially worked in easy, but no one on the planet is going to use is looking to their to-do app to make their life fun. Like it was a very misguided path in my view of like that is not where I go to source fun in my life. Like my life's not fun enough. I need a better to-do app. It's just not where I go. Exactly. And so they had no idea where their value was. They were just so off. And so I don't know if they stumbled into that or what, but I was just always struck at how off base. I imagined them like in design sessions, really trying to ramp up the fun and potentially over time, really missing the ball on where their value was and not understanding why, like, well, but we've gotten so much more fun.
But then the question that I have is if they say it's because of all the fun, right? And you say, no, it's because ease of use and listing all the tasks I have to do. If part of their design team is like, yeah, no, that's not it.
And I don't know. I didn't get to, I didn't talk to them enough to know they're like, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And maybe I didn't. Maybe there were people out there who really, did need to be fun. I don't know. They got bought by somebody else. They're called something else now, but, and now everybody else has those features. But I do think that just simply asking and listening to, I have been flabbergasted talking to clients sometimes who get frustrated because they hear from users and clients about what is really working, what they wish was different and whatnot. And I get that can probably be frustrating sometimes, but it's such rich information. You don't have to, I mean, it really is the hotbed core of eat the fish, spit out the bones, just because, feedback says way more about the person than it does your thing. So you have to decide what parts of it are yours and what parts you get rid of. But that's how you improve and become so valuable that, you want that weekly email or whatever it is. You want that thing.
Yeah, you do. And then the other part is you, of course, have to structure your organization to make sure that once the feedback comes, you actually do something with it.
Right. That it actually like shows up in a thing, or that you work it in, or that you listen and have the ability to ask the questions. Because I think one reason I've heard people get frustrated is that they hear feedback from a client or a customer or a user, and they know that feedback is misplaced because the person has formed it in terms of the solution that they wish it was. Like, oh, you should have a button that lets you blah, blah, blah. And the person's like, that's dumb. You don't need that button because you can do that 10 other ways. Missing the fact that person isn't finding it easy enough to see that, like, they don't know that there are 10 other ways. So like you have to kind of listen for the problem underneath the request or the opportunity underneath the request. And that's where you get value. But you can't just skip over the fact that a person is taking the time to share with you that they're already committed enough to actually spend time to give you feedback. What would make them even more into your thing?
Yeah. So I think that really my thought is, in wrapping up, that the business development, the emails to new customers is the way to expand, but the marketing to existing clients that you love is the way to evolve.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories.
You
can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing Just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Elliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.